Good afternoon and welcome to our webinar on cleaner construction. Now, it's Energy Day at COP26, where the summit will focus on moving away from fossil fuels towards more sustainable alternatives, an area where HS2 construction sites are excelling at. And as the hosts of this year's summit, there's a lot of scrutiny on the UK to show climate leadership and demonstrate that we're walking the walk as well as talking the talk. Now, High Speed 2 is the UK government's flagship infrastructure project, the biggest in Europe. And investment in new rail is a crucial component to decarbonise the transport sector, the country's biggest emitter of carbon. But how we build is as important as what we build. And today's session will focus on how innovative new technologies on our construction sites are leading the way in decarbonising the construction process. After the presentation part of this webinar, we will also have a Q&A where we'll be answering any questions from you, the audience. We're going to do our best to get through as many of those as possible during the time we have. Now, we don't anticipate any technical issues during our event, but should you experience any connection issues, for instance, if your feed freezes, wait for about 10 seconds, then it will most likely correct itself. But if this doesn't happen, use the leave button to exit the event and rejoin using the event link. This slide shows some of the features on Teams in case you're not familiar with it. Along the bottom, you'll see play and pause, volume, and full screen controls. So all attendees' microphones are muted. However, you can still participate, like I said, through the submission of questions via the questions panel on the right-hand side of your screen. If at any point during the conversation you want to ask a question, you can click the Ask a Question button, type in your question and hit send. This will come straight through to me. I'll be keeping an eye on questions that come through as we go. And at the end of the session today, we'll answer as many of them as we can. Finally, your feedback on today's event is greatly appreciated. And after the session, we will send around a short feedback form, which will take only a couple of minutes to complete. We want to learn more about what you think, and that will be quite important in helping to develop our engagement with you. Before we begin, I want to quickly highlight the centrepiece of our activity for COP26. We've proudly launched our virtual pavilion, an online environmental exhibition which is open to anyone. This is a CGI representation of Interchange Station in the West Midlands, winner of the BREEAM Outstanding Award for Sustainability. And this puts it in the top 1% of buildings in the country for its environmental credentials. So visitors can walk around the station, interact with various hotspots and learn more about how HS2 is tackling climate change. It's a really valuable resource to find out more about the innovation happening across the HS2 project. Now, the UK presidency of the COP26 summit has laid out a number of focus areas, and HS2 is already contributing towards a lot of these. You can see some of these on the screen, and you'll learn more about them in the pavilion and, of course, on the webinars we're hosting, including today. HS2 and our partners are innovating in all of these areas, becoming industry leaders and an exemplar government project. Today, we're focusing on how HS2 will help with the energy transition agenda. And as I mentioned before, that is what's happening at COP26 in Glasgow today. You can see on the screen, the UK presidency's goal is to accelerate the transition towards cleaner energy. And HS2 construction sites are hotbeds of innovation in this area. We're trialling new technologies to move the construction sector away from diesel and towards a more sustainable future. The size, scale, and longevity of the HS2 project means we can do things differently, and we're working with our partners to change the industry for good. Visit an HS2 construction site and you will see the site of the future here today. So we're now going to show you a video of HS2 Minister Andrew Stevenson's visit to one of our sites recently.
The building and construction sector faces a huge challenge as it's responsible for 39% of global carbon emissions. At HS2, we're already tackling this challenge and building back better. We're working with our construction partners to build the cleanest railway possible by cutting carbon emissions by 50%.
It's great to see how HS2 is leading the charge in decarbonising construction, and that's having a ripple effect through the whole construction sector in the country. I've seen a range of innovations from traditional diesel vehicles now using biofuels. I've seen ways of reducing the amount of raw materials that we're needing to use in the construction process. I've also seen hydrogen and electric welfare pods. So again, you're removing diesel generators from the site.
From design to construction and through to the operation of trains and stations, we're finding ways to cut carbon at every stage to build the railway with the smallest carbon footprint possible. All HS2 stations are designed to be low carbon. Interchange Station in the West Midlands will be in the top 1% of eco-friendly buildings in the UK. And when it comes to transporting materials to site, we also cut carbon by using rail rather than road. Using freight trains, we'll take the equivalent of 1.5 million HGVs off our roads over the next 10 years. When materials arrive on site, the latest low-emission diggers and cranes are used to build the railway, making sure the air is as clean as possible for those living nearby. And we make sure very little goes to waste, reusing 95% of our excavated materials towards the creation of new public spaces, grasslands and wildlife habitats.
This is all helping to ensure that this project is leading the way in environmental sustainability.
Thank you there to HS2 Minister Andrew Stevenson, who was speaking from our Euston Station construction site. I now want to introduce our panel for today. Joining HS2 Limited will be our Euston construction partner, SCS Railways, alongside Imperial College London and the Manufacturing Technology Centre. It's now time to hand over to them, so I want to introduce our first speaker, Neil Waite.
Thank you, Hugo. Good afternoon all. I'm Neil Waite, the Head of Environmental Science at HS2. At HS2, we have an innovation strategy and we have a dedicated innovation team that work with technical experts across the business. And for environment, we focus on the big ticket items. So that's materials we use, decarbonising concrete and steel, biodiversity, enhancing biodiversity, and the topic of this webinar today, how we clean up the construction equipment we use. So that challenge to move away from diesel that has been the challenge for the construction sector for many decades. For diesel in construction, it's slightly different for on-road. Of course, we have legislation in place now that will prohibit the use of diesel and petrol from 2030. But for the construction sector, it really is an industry-led initiative. And how innovation works at HS2 is work collaboratively with a series of partners. We pick the right partners for the right project and then work as a team to identify novel solutions, take those prototypes, trial them on our sites, prove they work, build a case study, so then the use of that new technology can be used across the whole of HS2 and the whole of the construction industry. We're now going to firstly focus on the role of research bodies as being a partner of that collaborative innovation process. So I'm going to introduce Claire.
Hi, so I'm Claire Picking and I head up construction and infrastructure in the Manufacturing Technology Centre. We're working with HS2.
Hi Claire, thanks for joining us. Can you please give us an overview of the work the Manufacturing Technology Centre does in the innovation area?
Yeah, so the Manufacturing Technology Centre works across very many industrial sectors, and the aim is transforming industry for a sustainable world. So supporting research and development as a decarbonisation enabler. The focus is really for us is bridging the gap between academia and industry. So we're working with industrial partners, academia, supply chain, and it's in encouraging the adoption of technologies and a manufacturing mindset, so for tackling the various challenges. Within many sectors, construction and infrastructure is no different. The environmental considerations are a major challenge, and specifically in terms of the air impact on things like the air quality, noise, CO2 emissions, and waste generated by this sector. So the MTC, we're working with HS2 and other industry partners on innovations in areas such as digital health and safety, silent rail, alternative rebar solutions, on and off-site productivity, reducing materials consumption and also waste generation, and encouraging a manufacturing design-led approach that allows for reuse and recycling of materials, so increasing the certainty of outcomes and reducing the reliance on fossil fuels in construction site equipment.
Thank you, Claire. There's a very wide range of projects there and a different range of challenges as well for the different types of projects. So how does a research body like MTC help address those wide range of challenges with all those different projects?
So there are some pockets of really good practice in the sector with progress being made. And there are things that can be developed and implemented in the short term, but there are also longer term challenges, such as the carbon impact of the most commonly used materials in construction, concrete and steel. So what we need to look at is both of those, the short term things that can be done now and also take a longer term view. So alternative materials and technologies do exist, but they have to compete with products that are low cost and easy to use. So work is required to develop these in order to make them viable alternatives.
Okay, thank you, Claire, for that insight. You'll be joining us later in the webinar to discuss these matters further. We're now going to show a video that highlights some of the cleaner equipment on our sites in use now.
Really important that the quality of the air that we breathe is clean. We have set an enormous challenge to all of our contractors across the route to build Britain's cleanest railway, set that challenge to be cleaner, to be greener, and to do it differently. And they've all taken that challenge on board. And as you can see today at the showcase event, we've got electric equipment, we have hybrid equipment, we have hydrogen fuel cell equipment, we've got renewable energy, all being showcased today at this Curzon Street Birmingham station site.
So that video and the photographs on this slide show a range of the cleaner alternative fuel equipment that's on our sites now. Across all our sites now, we have a range of electric equipment, hybrid, solar, wind, hydrogen, and biogas solutions. Many of these started as innovation projects, as trials to show they worked initially and show they could be rolled out. One of the key partners we add to our innovation projects is an academic partner. So now I'm going to introduce Daniel.
Afternoon, everyone. My name is Daniel Marsh, and I'm a Programme Manager at the Centre for Low Emission Construction at Imperial College London.
Good afternoon, Daniel. Thank you for joining us. Can you please give us an overview of the work that you do through Imperial at the Centre for Low Emission Construction across the whole industry, not just HS2, the whole wider construction industry?
Of course, Neil. The Centre for Low Emission Construction has spent about the last 15 or 16 years working really closely with the construction sector, central government policymakers, the planning authorities, the supply chain. And a big part of the work that we're doing there is raising awareness of the air quality impacts from construction and demolition activity. Often these activities are taking place in very complex urban environments. With the trials that we carry out, they use this to produce those pieces of high quality scientific evidence that's then used to inform future policy that regulates the industry. We work with the manufacturers of low emission technologies, and we use the sites as living labs, and we go out there and we're measuring machinery emissions, we're measuring occupational exposure emissions. And with all of this information that we're gathering, we then develop guidance for the industry, for planners and for air quality professionals.
Thank you, Daniel. Now, over the last couple of years, yourself and your colleagues have worked on a series of projects with HS2. Could you run through a few of those?
Definitely. I mean, obviously, within the scope of our time today, we haven't got time to really touch the amount of work that we're doing with HS2 to help deliver those air quality and carbon reduction benefits. But to talk about a few of the more recent projects that we've been involved in, we've been looking at alternative fuels, so moving away from diesel. And while a lot of these machines are still running on liquid fuels, what else is available? And actually, what does it really deliver in the way of reducing emissions at the tailpipe? We recently tested the air quality benefits of a range of air quality of fuels on an HS2 site up in Coventry. Whilst the results of this trial showed that there was limited air quality benefits when compared with traditional red diesel, it did demonstrate that there is potential in carbon reduction depending on sustainable sourcing of alternative fuels. The real results from this trial really kind of highlight just how important it is that we continue to test and evaluate all of these different solutions that are coming forward and produce that scientific evidence to kind of encourage the uptake of the cleaner technologies that work across the HS2 project and the wider construction industry.
I mean, that study, Daniel, has been published on the HS2 website, is available for everybody to see. And it was really useful for us as HS2 to inform our contractors and supply chain that although there isn't massive reductions in air pollution from biofuels, there is significant 80-90% plus savings from carbon. But there is a but, of course. Those fuels need to be sustainably sourced, and HS2 recommend to our contractors the Zemo partnership, which is an accreditation service for making sure biofuels are sustainably sourced and audited regularly. Can you tell us about some more of the projects you've worked on, HS2?
Oh, completely. I mean, as you just touched on there, this is looking at alternatives to diesel, but as we're moving forward towards those decarbonisation targets across the whole sector, we're looking at other fuels and particularly looking at the gas fuels that's coming through at the moment. HS2 have provided the test environment for state-of-the-art LPG engines through the OakTech Clean Air Gas Engine project, and eventually that will be moving forward into hydrogen. We're also using dual-fuel hydrogen, working with Ulemco, and we're looking towards using hydrogen fuel cells to provide the energy that's required even of using electric plant on these sites.
Perhaps we can conclude now, Daniel, by perhaps give us some insight into the non-road mobile machinery, so the retrofit project and the work you did there.
Again, the HS2 project is the major infrastructure project running in Western Europe at the moment, and it's sucking in so much of the construction plant that already exists in this country and in Europe. Much of that equipment doesn't meet the minimum emission stage that has been set as a stringent standard required for HS2. We recently ran a project where we worked with partners, we brought them together to deliver retrofit on these medium and large machines to actually reduce the emissions. So taking the oldest plant, the lowest asset on someone's fleet of machines and making it the cleanest machine that they now have to use on the HS2 site. The outcome of this project was to actually lead to Energy Saving Trust certification for this new type of retrofit technology, and it can now be rolled out across the HS2 project. Of course, this doesn't just benefit HS2. This construction machinery will be moved around the UK, used on other projects. So HS2 is leading on this industry-wide rollout to benefit the environment, the communities, the workforce, and to lead a cleaner construction industry when the project's finished.
Thank you, Daniel. And the real benefit in that project is it's available for everybody now, isn't it? It's not just HS2. We're now going to have a look at a video which explains that project in a bit more detail.
As part of Balfour Beatty's Building New Futures sustainability strategy, environment and communities are both key components alongside materials. The retrofit solution that we are working with today gives us an opportunity to extend the asset life of some of our larger machinery to reach the highest emission standards. This collaboration has been made possible through the funding of HS2 and the hard work of Eminox, who have actually devised the retrofit solution, the Centre for Low Emission Construction, who have helped devise the test, and Emissions Analytics, who are also doing the testing today. And it's only through these sorts of collaborations where you have multiple stakeholders that come together that you can crack some of these hard problems.
HS2 have got one of the tightest emission standards for non-road mobile machinery on any project running in Europe at the moment. One of the ways you can meet these emission standards is through taking an older machine and putting on after exhaust treatment that reduces the emissions.
So the Eminox system comprises a diesel particulate filter technology for the capture and burn off of soot and particulate matter, and a selective catalytic reduction system which actively reduces NOx emissions from the engine in the exhaust stream.
Yesterday we took the emissions from the piling rig without the retrofit solution, and today we are now testing the piling rig in operation with the retrofit equipment. In theory, we should be getting a much cleaner exhaust from the engine.
So once the approval has been given on this retrofit to show that it meets the standards that are required, it will be rolled out across similar engine families, not just in piling rigs, but other large machines.
At Balfour Beatty, we're passionate about air quality. We see this kind of technology as a key means to improving air quality for local communities and also doing our bit to protect the environment.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you to Dan and Neil for that really interesting discussion around some of the trials aimed at really building evidence in the space of alternatives. And while these studies really are key in creating confidence in different approaches, it's really vital that these trials are translated into the norm and really rolled out across the wider construction industry, not just HS2, to create a real change on the ground. I do have a slide popping up, there it is, with some of the key innovations that we have on our sites, and they really are becoming, the norm, being deployed across a variety of sites. A few of these Dan and Neil touched on as well, but really including the use of renewable energy, hydrogen, material by rail, and the use of really different methodologies. But in terms of really implementing these alternatives on the ground, I'm joined today by Jerry Badura, one of our main work civil contractors, SES. So, hi, Jerry.
Afternoon, everyone. Jerry Badura. I'm the Environment Sustainability Director for our Skanska Costain Strabag joint venture. We're delivering the London Tunnel section for HS2.
Excellent. Thanks, Jerry. And SES has made some really big industry-first commitments in meeting net zero and reducing emissions further. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about those commitments, or the background behind them, and really driving them forward?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, net zero gets spoken about a lot, and the targets around 2035 and 2050. But the reality is that if we don't start acting now, then we're never going to get there. So within SES, we've really been focusing on some of our big challenging carbon issues, such as concrete and steel, fuel and energy. And the latter two, particularly earlier in the year, we put forward to the senior leaders this idea of potentially trying to be diesel-free by 2023. And it wasn't the easiest thing to put on the table to start off with, but very quickly we all came to the conclusion that we have to be ambitious and we have to at least try. And we said, well, even if we don't achieve it, at least we're going to get a lot better than not trying at all.
Yeah, excellent. And it's really important that we start to set clear timeframes and deadlines on meeting these initiatives and rolling them out on the ground, because too often we become quite complacent in day-to-day activities and getting the job done. So having really these short, medium and longer term ambitions and goals is really important. And I know a lot of industries and contractors across the industry are setting some similar targets and ambitions. There obviously are challenges around meeting the commitments, which you've touched on already, and really around changing these mindsets. We've used diesel in construction for many, many years now. So I don't know if you've got any really practical examples of where there's been a challenge and maybe how you've resolved it, or the actions you've taken to really change that common mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. Two very quick examples. One of which, we've touched on earlier in this presentation around biofuels and diesel alternatives. We did what needed to be done. We did the trials. We used it on one site, and very quickly demonstrated how these drop-in alternatives were no hampering to what we were doing. And following the diesel-free ambition, almost overnight, we've managed to get over 80% of our diesel replaced with an alternative, which is a huge success. And one of the probably larger examples that we also have is around electric multi-service vehicles, which are the little machines that go in behind the tunnel boring machines. And when we first went out, we got prices back that put electric alternatives at probably 70% more than diesel. And had we just looked at the cost there and then, they would have been put on the shelf. But because of the leadership buy-in and this determination to cut our carbon as much as possible, the team were really empowered to challenge this and work with the suppliers and look at all the factors involved. And what quickly transpired was that actually the savings that we achieved by not having to put in massive ventilations from a health and safety perspective helped offset some of that additional cost on the electric alternatives. So we've actually reached a point now where we've got a financially viable solution that not only saves us carbon, but has a huge occupational safety benefit as well. And we've only got a handful of diesel kits that we still have to use, fundamentally because there is an electric available to do it, but a massive victory on that front.
That's a really interesting and fantastic achievement. We do share these sorts of lessons learned through our Learning Legacy program on HS2 as well, which the website is accessible, where you can go and find the different learnings that we've sort of built evidence on. But I mean, Jerry, the question I'm often asked by many individuals, and Neil touched on it as well, is, I mean, where should we be focusing our attention to make the biggest impact? Every construction site is different. I mean, SCS will know across their sites. Space can be a challenge, location can be a challenge, access to power can be a challenge. But what's next? SCS has made these really big commitments. What's the next step in meeting this diesel-free by 2023 challenge?
Well, the reality is that there isn't a silver bullet. So, we're only going to achieve this by doing a lot of little things as quickly as we can across the piece. So we're going to be rolling out diesel-free in earnest next year, and we'll definitely have our first, if not many, diesel-free sites. And the real challenge is to not just stop at biofuels, but really push further beyond that and look at all the hybrid solutions that we've mentioned earlier, and green hydrogen and really fully electric, and try and push as far as we can on that. We need to challenge the norms, and we need to work with doing those trials, proving that they work, and then getting them rolled out as quickly as possible, so that we can all benefit from that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jerry. Jerry is going to join us later in the session for the Q&A section of the webinar, but it was really interesting to hear some of those practical examples on the ground, Jerry, so thank you so much. There are, of course, challenges and barriers around the adoption of some cleaner alternatives that Jerry touched on as well, such as availability. Charging infrastructure has been one of the key challenges that we've faced on the project as well. And access to green hydrogen is another key driver in this space. So it's really, we need to be working and continue to work collaboratively across the industry, across academia, to really have this lasting change in the space. And with the sheer scale of the HS2 program, we've got this fantastic opportunity to leave a legacy in the space by trialing and testing alternatives and rolling them out at scale, essentially. And the hydrogen strategy launched by the government earlier this year was a really excellent example of some of the commitments that the government is making in this space. And at HS2, we're no different. We're working on some key projects through our innovation program. The first Jerry briefly touched on is SCS are trialling hydrogen fuel cell generators as a replacement for diesel. The second in the hydrogen space is through a collaboration with our joint venture partner, Balfour Beatty Vinci, up in the northern sections of the route. And Ulemco will be fitting 3 heavy goods vehicles with hydrogen dual fueling systems. And then the third is really aimed to bring together key partners to leave a legacy in the hydrogen space. And again, as these projects start to develop, we will be sharing the findings across our online platforms and our Learning Legacy platforms as well. But I'd like to welcome Claire back from the Manufacturing Technology Centre. And Claire, I just want to ask if you could give a quick overview of the legacy project that we're working on to really leave a lasting impact in that hydrogen space.
Yeah, okay. So as we've heard, HS2 are committed to supporting the UK's decarbonisation strategy and acknowledging that one of the major environmental impacts of construction works is linked to the movement of materials and waste through the use of HGVs. So HS2 are tackling this on many levels and working with MTC on a business case evaluation. So the key aim of the project is to build that strategic business case, ultimately leading towards the bigger ambition of leaving a legacy of hydrogen infrastructure through the scale and reach of HS2. And that will enable the acceleration of UK's decarbonisation strategy. So MTC will be using our own and HS2's wider network within construction and infrastructure sector to bring together a community of relevant partners and stakeholders to identify the key challenges actually associated with the deployment of this technology and define a roadmap to addressing them. It will involve evaluating full scale of opportunity within and actually beyond HS2, the current supply and demand constraints, timeframes for deployment, logistical challenges, and changing regulations.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you so much, Claire. And again, as we start to move forward on these projects, we will be sharing those outcomes with everybody. But from the hydrogen space, it's really important that we start to balance out supply and demand to really drive that change in decarbonising construction. So I'm going to hand back to Hugo now for the question and answer section of the webinar.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed, Andrea. And a big thank you to all our speakers today for sharing what I think has been quite an insightful conversation so far. But now we want to get you involved in that conversation. So here's a reminder of how to submit your questions using the Q&A function in the top right-hand corner of the screen. We're going to get through as many questions as we can, given the time we've had. There's quite a few people on the call today, and we've had quite a lot of questions. So thank you to everyone who's been submitting them during the session. So we're going to start with a few of those. First question, and I think this should probably go towards Neil, if possible. How did HS2 decide upon the 50% carbon reduction? How did HS2 decide on 50% carbon reduction? How have you ensured your baseline is accurate and not an overestimation of what can be achieved?
Thank you, Hugo. So HS2 committed to the 50% reduction during the parliamentary stage of phase 1, so the London to Birmingham part of the route. So that was an industry-leading commitment at the time, and we've got a whole process of carbon management. We were the first major infrastructure project, for example, to adopt the carbon management standard past 2080. Indeed, we helped develop it, and we're helping develop it further. But it's really important, as I say, that our baseline is accurate, and we report against that. All of our contractors report to ourselves their progress through the design process, and now, of course, Main Works is operating. The good news is we're only a few weeks away, so within the next month we'll be publishing our first annual environmental sustainability report, and that's an annual commitment from the Minister and HS2 to be transparent about our performance, about carbon management and all environmental topics. So within a few weeks' time, that report will be published, and there'll be an update of our progress on the ground, our great progress, which follows the theme of the discussions we've had today with our progress of decarbonising construction.
Yeah, I think there'll be quite a few people on the call who'll be interested in that, without a doubt. We've got one here, and I think I'm going to give this to you first, Jerry, and then maybe we might ask other people what they think. It's how much are you transporting materials by road or utilising new or existed upgrading rail? Obviously, on you guys on the ground at Euston, what are you guys doing to reduce those lorry movements?
Yeah, so we're taking over 1 million HGVs off the road through some world-class logistics, where the excavated material being moved by rail, and then tunnel segments are actually coming in on the same line. And we're continually evaluating what other materials could come in and out on this route. And in some places where we are bringing lorries in or HGVs, again, trying to look at if we bring stuff in, can it go out on that same truck to really reduce those movements and reduce that impact. And I'm pretty sure we're not the only contractor looking at that kind of thing.
No, definitely not. And obviously that's a huge impact as well to people living nearby the site, reducing all those lorries trundling by. Here we go. We've got, again, maybe Neil, maybe Andrea. We're hearing a lot about electric vehicles at COP26. That's obviously one of the big focuses at the summit. Is there any applicable crossover between the innovation happening on HS2 sites and then accelerating the move away from internal combustion powered consumer vehicles. We have touched on that a bit already, but is there anything else you want to add on that front?
Yeah, well, I'll kick us off, Neil, and then we can partner in there. But there's been a lot of movement in the availability of electric plant over the last few years. And I mean, I remember back in 2017, we were doing large exhumation works at St. James's Gardens outside Euston Station, where we had a large marquee over an area with a number of archaeologists hand exhumating the graves. And I mean, from an occupational health and safety perspective, we couldn't have diesel emissions being trapped within this enclosed space. And it really, I mean, it was a key aspect of our CSJV early works contractor that pushed to do things a little bit differently. And we started to see small pieces of electric plant being rolled out really as the norm across that site. So smaller wheelbarrows, smaller excavators and the like, and a lot of hybrid equipment, which was sort of the bigger pieces. I mean, since then to today, there's electric equipment on all of our sites across the program. They generally are focused on smaller pieces, so telehandlers, smaller dumpers, as I said, smaller excavators. And then the much larger scale where they don't move around a lot, but we had the first 250-ton fully electric crawler crane in the UK from Select Plant Hire on one of our sites earlier this year. There's really a lot of work on going in sort of that larger pieces of equipment as well, where electric may not be possible. So where battery sizes become too big, or the hours of use that we need the pieces of equipment for, where battery's just not the best option. And that's where we're really focusing the attention on some of the biofuels and the hydrogen alternatives. So, I mean, through the project, over the last 3 or 4 years, there's already been a massive shift from the use of electric plant for 1 or 2 activities to really just being adopted as the norm where it can be across the program.
Neil, is there anything you want to add on that, or do you think Andrew's covered most of the bases there?
Yeah, I think she's covered most of it. I mean, as you said, we have seen a rapid rise in the last few years. As Andrew said, when we started early works, there was virtually none, and now all contracts across HS2 use it. You don't have the same range anxiety that you do with a car, of course, because you're not worried about driving 200 miles and getting home again, and you can have sources of power on a site. But as you've seen from the innovations we're sort of piloting and talking about today, we're really trying to keep our options open. So that's why we're having a balance of electric, hybrid, solar, wind and hydrogen as well, so we can cover the range scales of power by different solutions.
Yeah, there's a whole host of stuff being used there by the sounds of it. I've got another one here. I'm going to pass this to you first, Dan, and then also Claire. I'd be quite interested to get your opinion on this as well. It's would we have seen these kind of innovations happening at this speed without the government investment in the project the size of HS2?
I think HS2 have created this environment where innovation can be tested, and having that funding in place is actually making it happen. We're in a construction sector that outside of the HS2 project just doesn't have the money available to take on where there may be risk and actually test and find out independently whether these new innovations do or don't work. Within the project, within the things that we've been able to test, there's short-term stepping stone solutions and there's longer-term solutions. And I think this is where, again, with the length of time within the HS2 project, it allows us to look far longer term than many short-term projects would be able to do. So yes, it's definitely accelerated the industry and opened up a whole host of innovation and people really thinking about some of the problems that we have on these sites and how to best deal with them.
Heartening to hear. Claire, anything else?
Yeah, and I would add that actually there are, within many infrastructure and construction businesses, there are the same sort of challenges here, but it is the scale of HS2, and as you say, the length of time that it's there, that actually means that we've got the opportunity to do more. There is also many companies or many businesses will have the same challenges, and this the government money also enables a collaborative approach to those, so we're able to actually look at common challenges across many different businesses. That means that we can look more in depth at them and come up with better innovative ideas, and HS2 is a big part of that.
Brilliant. Absolutely sounds like it's having a huge impact, of course. Jerry, I might give this to you, but if not, if someone else wants to come in on this question, please do raise your hand and I'll get your opinion. It's presumably someone after watching the video says that looks like a lot of electric plant. How do you foresee being able to charge it all simultaneously? And where does that electricity come from? Is there anything you want to say from an SES perspective, Jerry?
Yeah, so from an SES perspective, we've done a lot of work actually now to ensure that the electricity that we are bringing in is on a fully renewable tariff. So, which is a great start. So at least what we are charging is as carbon neutral as can be. It all comes down to the range of that equipment and trying to charge as much as you can overnight so that it then runs during the day. It's just another bit of planning and the logistics that the team needs to do, really. You know, they plan all sorts of things. They can figure out how to shift plants around as necessary as well.
Anyone else want to come in on that?
Yeah, I'll just add in on that. I mean, power is always going to be a massive problem for the construction sector. Having off-grid energy at the sites, and as we're moving into an area where we need more power on these sites, better management of that power is so important. Some of the innovation that we have been trialling is EcoNet, looking at power management systems as how to best control that over the day, and also looking at hydrogen fuel cell technology for producing that clean energy when you've got a green hydrogen supply. So this is all part of the process on our stepping stones towards that future sustainable, cleaner project delivery.
Absolutely, that's a good point, actually. I think it's going to have to be our last question because we are running out of time, and it's to do with construction, but it's moving away from the fuel side of things. So it's what is HS2 doing on a low carbon concrete, or just doing on low carbon concrete to deploy its scale? I know we are using low carbon concrete on our sites, but Neil, is there anything you want to say from that perspective about what we're doing to eliminate carbon from our concrete on the project?
Yeah, certainly, and a bit like Claire inferred in her last answer, this is a challenge for the whole construction industry, isn't it? How do we decarbonise these big ticket items like concrete and steel? So we are very active in that area. Our innovation team have a host of projects working at looking at various solutions. We've got relationships with the manufacturers and a lot of the bodies, the standards bodies dealing with concrete, and we have an innovation working group. And a number of our contractors are actually trialling different concretes at the moment. Some of them are using them for less higher engineered assets. Some are simply burying pieces of new low carbon concrete in different soil conditions so we can test how long they last and how the material works. So there's a whole range of projects across all contractors at the moment looking at different solutions. But that is really one of the big sort of nuts to crack across the construction industry. So we are presenting ourselves and open to innovations and working on that space. I know MTC are involved as well, so I'll leave over to
Yeah, and actually, if you look at the hierarchy of sustainability, it's reduce, reuse, recycle. So actually, another big element to it is not only the material, but it's the use of that material. So I mentioned briefly some of the work we're doing on a rebar alternative. Increasing the accuracy of a rebar cage, as an example, means that you need less material outside of that cage. So taking it, not only the material, there's a lot that we are also looking at geopolymer concretes, but it's how you use it and how you can actually use it most effectively and reduce the amount of material that you're actually using.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually, especially referencing that hierarchy. I'm afraid that's all we've got time for, guys. We have run out of time, so I just want to say a big thank you to all our panel for providing their expert opinion on this subject matter and taking the time to answer as many questions as we can today. So thank you, everybody, for that. We really, really appreciate it. And before we finish, I just want to say we would like your feedback on today's session. We're going to post a link in the announcements for you to provide that, and we will try and send an email around following this webinar. So thank you all once again for taking the time to tune in. And for all of the questions that you've submitted. We've tried our best to answer as many as we can during the time we've had available. If we didn't manage to answer your question today, or if you've got anything else about the wider HS2 project, do contact our help desk, who are available all day, every day. Now, don't forget, you can sign up to our other two COP26 webinars on the 9th of November we'll be hearing about how HS2 will be resilient to more extreme weather events, which I'm sure you agree is particularly relevant after we saw some of the difficulties of those trying to get to the summit in Glasgow during the weekend on the trains. And on the 11th of November, do tune in to learn more about our award-winning sustainable stations, some of the most environmentally friendly buildings in the world. You can register for both of these sessions at hs2.org.uk/COP26. Now, the last thing from me is a reminder about our virtual pavilion, where you can learn more about how HS2 is tackling climate change as part of an interactive tour around Interchange Station in the West Midlands. Recordings of today's webinar, as well as links to the other two, will also be available in here. Much like before, just go to hs2.org.uk/COP26 to access it. So thank you very much for attending today's webinar. I hope you've learned more about how we're decarbonising the construction of the railway, and I do hope you'll join us again in the future. Thank you.